Welcome to In the Spotlight. I'm Eric Townell. Today we journey to the Women's Rights National Historical Park in Seneca Falls. And joining me in the Spotlight is Denise DeLucia. She is the education specialist here at the park. Welcome, Denise. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you.
So this is a wonderful place for families and really everyone to visit.
It is. We have programming for all ages. We have junior ranger programming. We have junior ranger activities for ages, 4 and up. We have tours and programs like we had today that are special and unique. And we try to do those, once a month or twice a month.
So you mentioned Junior Ranger program.
Correct.
So tell us about that.
So every national park has a junior ranger program, typically geared to children 4 to about 13, where they take a booklet or a pamphlet and they go around the park and they learn about the story of that park and they earn a badge that looks a little like this. But it's called the junior ranger badge, and we swear that the young people in as junior rangers, and we do that all across the country.
Is that right?
That is right.
And once they're a junior ranger at one park, are they junior rangers everywhere?
No, so they go from park to park to park, and they get junior ranger badges everywhere they go.
And how many national parks are there?
I believe 420 right now. So I think that's the right number. We've increased a couple in the last year. So, yeah.
So that's a good program for young families visiting.
It is, very much so, yeah.
And
not just this park, but any of the other parks. Yeah.
So if they were interested in women's rights in particular, what would they find at the Women's Rights National Historic Park?
So we tell the story. We are tasked with telling the story of the 1848 convention, which was the very first ever convention that spoke only about women's rights. So in the mid 19th century, the way that you got word out and you got to speak about your topic was to host a convention. And they would host these conventions, especially on reform ideas, and they would talk about the rights of enslaved people. They would talk about indigenous rights. They would talk about reforming prisons, and things like that. And then somewhere in there they'd say, maybe we should give women some, rights to own property too. And so it's not the first time that people spoke about the rights of women or spoke about the rights of women publicly. It's the first time it was concentrated for 2 days, where the only thing they spoke about was the rights of women.
And that was what year?
1848.
1848, and that happened on this property?
That happened right here in the Wesleyan Chapel right next door.
The Wesleyan Chapel.
And we are tasked with keeping that resource available and sharing that story with the nation. That is what we do here.
And that's a historical structure people can visit?
It is, correct. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so what year does that stem from?
The Wesleyan Chapel was built in 1843, I believe.
So
I could be wrong.
Really about the time this whole area was developing.
That's correct. Yeah. That's correct.
Upstate Western New York.
Mm-hmm.
And was it part of the Erie Canal development? Because the canal is not far from the park here.
The canal is right. That's correct. It's right across the street. But the canal came through, quite a number of years prior.
Okay.
But it had a couple of expansions, right? So it had the first one, and then the expansion.
Yes.
Almost essentially the minute it was finished.
Yeah.
And then another 100 years later. But so probably it could be right after the first expansion.
Mm-hmm. And at that time, Seneca Falls was pretty a small town, a rural town. Would you say?
It was. Yeah, correct. And it wasn't until the end of the century that it got to be a little bit bigger. And then, of course, now we're back to it being a small town.
And so at the park property, people would see that chapel.
Correct.
And then the building that we're in today.
Yes.
What is in this building?
So the visitor center houses all of our exhibits, and also our first wave statue, which is a statue comprised of it's a bronze statue of people processing to or from the convention.
I
The
see.
1848 convention. So some of the people in the statues are actual attendants of the convention, like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Frederick Douglass and Lucretia Mott, Martha Coffin Wright. And then some of them are just, people that the artists and the sculptors thought would, people who would have come or who did come.
I see.
So there are some small children in the statues. There are some women, with children, bringing them to the convention.
A representative crowd.
Correct. Yeah.
That's fascinating. So you mentioned some principal individuals.
Correct.
Lucretia Mott. And now, among those, who were local?
So Elizabeth Cady Stanton lived right here in Seneca Falls,
Ah.
and the park owns her property and
Is that true?
maintains her property here in Seneca Falls on Washington Street. So Lucretia,
We could visit that? The Stanton House we could visit?
we can.
Oh,
It's under construction right now, but it should be all completed by June 1st.
well, it would have been better if she'd taken care of that while she was alive.
She took very good care of it while she was alive.
Good for her.
And she had a lot of servants to help her through the years, not typically a lot at once, but through the time that she lived here, she had quite a few.
But it's park property now.
It is park property now. Also park property is the McClintock House over in Waterloo on Williams Street.
In Waterloo.
In Waterloo.
Okay.
We have two properties in Waterloo. We have the McClintock House and the Hunt House. So the McClintock House was owned by the Hunts, but rented by the McClintocks.
I see.
And that's the parlor where the Declaration of Sentiments was written.
Oh, it was written in that parlor.
In that house, yeah.
Oh, I see.
And the table that it was written on is at the Smithsonian.
Is that so? Okay. So these are national treasures.
They are.
The houses and the
The
artifacts.
houses and the artifacts, correct, yeah.
What artifacts would people find here at the museum?
So we don't have a large collection out for visitors to see, but we do have a pretty large exhibit area on the second floor here at the visitor center. We have the other large portion of our exhibit is what we call the Wall of Women. So typically when people walk through the back door, they're kind of looking right into the face of just a wall of photos.
Wall of photos.
And each of those photos represents a different time and a different space in history that women have occupied and up to now.
Up to now.
And it goes right up the stairs, which is also,
Unique.
yeah, a little more than ironic, I think, that it's going up the stairs and it goes up with time.
Now, what's at the top of the stairs?
The top of the stairs is going up from if you follow the Wall of Women from the back door, you go up the stairs, and the second floor brings you to the exhibits.
And there's that marvelous quilt right at the top.
And there is a quilt up there, and people ask me all the time who made that, and I don't know
That's okay.
I don't know the answer
That's
to
all right. It's a quilt.
it is, and it's beautiful, and we should know the name of the person who made
That's okay.
it. So I'm sure somebody in the building does. It's just not me.
Well, that's okay. And so, but other artifacts are here, dresses and that sort of thing.
There are. So we have a dress that was made by the University of Rochester. I don't know if you got to see that.
Yes, I did.
So that's on loan to us. From them, we do not own that. That is on loan to us. And that's really interesting that students participated in the creation of that. And we get a lot of comments and questions about that.
I see.
So that's pretty interesting. We have exhibits on the role of women in society. We have exhibits on, kind of gender growth in children We kind of do that with toys and what's appropriate for boys and girls, and
I see.
we have school groups in here. We talk about, well, is this a boy toy or is this a girl toy? Is this who can play with these toys? And they all come to the same conclusion. Everyone plays with whatever they want to play with. So that
And I noticed one more statue up here.
There is. So we have a statue of Sojourner Truth up here.
Sojourner Truth.
Yeah, on the second floor. And I believe it was created by the same person who created the statue downstairs. Lloyd Lilly is the sculptor's name. But I have not gotten confirmation on that.
Mm-hmm.
But I do. I am under the assumption that it was also created by Lloyd Lilly. So
lots of toys and lots of images and more sculpture. Anything else that jumps to mind? I saw a scale model of the buildings, I thought.
There is a scale model. So when the park first became a park in the 80s, and then in the 90s when they were rehabbing and bringing the Wesleyan Chapel back to life from the laundromat that it was when the Park Service received it. There was a different, the chapel, had a kind of a different life to it. And so what they did was they kept just the originality of the building. So there were the two walls on the sides and the roof. And it was wide open. And they closed it off for a number of reasons, probably not the least of which is this is central New York and we have weather.
Yeah, we have weather. Speaking of outside, I saw this wall that goes down the property.
Correct.
Tell us what is that?
Yeah, so that's an art installation, statue, kind of outdoor, that we call it the water wall.
The water wall.
The water's not on right now,
Oh.
so I apologize to you.
We're speaking in the early May.
We are. It's going to be up and running in a couple of weeks. So the entire language of the Declaration of Sentiments and all of the signers are kind of actually impressed with stainless steel letters into the stone. And
say again, that's the Declaration of
the
Sentiments.
Declaration of Sentiments.
Oh.
That's the document that was written for the 1848 convention right
I
here.
see.
Which was written at the McClintock House.
Uh-huh.
And it was based on the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, I see.
So they wrote it very similarly.
Mm-hmm.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal.
Oh,
So
okay.
we fixed what, the guys got wrong. But, and then they added grievances the same way that they did it with the Declaration of Independence. And so all the grievances are out there on the wall as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were 300 people who attended the convention in 1848, but only 100 actually signed the document.
Oh, I see.
Because they were a little worried about putting their signature on something that could, if they were a business person, they could, receive backlash for that.
Right, we know Frederick Douglass's descendants are still in the area. And are there other signers of that document that we would know from our current life in Western New York?
So Elizabeth Cady Stanton signed it. All of the initiators of the 1848 convention signed it. Let's see. There was a Mr. Chamberlain from Seneca Falls who signed it. There's another gentleman whose last name I can't remember right now, but he was a pretty prominent business fellow in town at the time. And I believe he does still have some
Descendants here.
descendants.
So very much a local phenomenon that this convention happened here for a reason.
Correct. Yeah. Well, it happened here for a couple of reasons. One, the Wesleyan Chapel was open to mixed audiences of men and women and people of color.
Right.
And where one of the reasons why prior to the Wesleyan Chapel's opening, around, not just here, but all out and around, was when they would have conventions for any other kind of reform. Oftentimes they would be out in the middle of a field.
Oh, right.
And that they did that because they couldn't get a hall that would allow, Black men to address a mixed audience or a woman to address a mixed audience.
Isn't that something?
So,
Yeah,
and the Wesleyans were, we're good.
And I believe the McClintocks were a Quaker
The
family.
McClintocks and the Hunts were Quakers. Lucretia Mott is also a very well known Quaker. So the Hunts and the McClintocks owned quite a bit of property. Mr. Hunt. Richard Hunt was one of the wealthiest men in this area. He owned woolen mills rather than cotton mills, which were very big at the time. But he would not support. He did not support any slave labor products.
Right.
And Thomas McClintock was a founding member of the Free Produce Society, which didn't oblige any kind of any products or that were acquired with slave labor. So in their stores, the McClintocks owned stores, operated stores rather, and they didn't sell they didn't sell sugar, they didn't sell cotton, they didn't sell any else.
Yeah, cotton and wool. That's a big dispute.
Right. And so, Richard Hunt owned quite a few mills actually in this. Woolen mills, correct. Yeah, woolen mills. And I think that that's also probably part of why this area had a lot of woolen mills, more than cotton. Also, probably it was easier to get wool here because there was sheep. But we did have the canal by that point.
Right.
Cotton could have made it up from New York Harbor up through the canal. So.
Interesting. Now, if a family is planning a visit to the Women's Rights National Historical, what else might they be able to see in this area? Are there attractions that they could put together, for instance?
There are. So right down the street here, we have the National Women's Hall of Fame. They're actually in the process of moving to the other side of the canal. We have the Seneca Museum of Waterways and Industry, which shares the story of the canal and the movement of ideas and goods and industry through the canal, and it's specific to this area. And then the Seneca Falls Historical Society has a lot of artifacts and also shares the story of the story that we share here. We also spend a lot of time with the new, I used to say brand new, but it's not brand new anymore. It's about 2 years old, but the Harriet Tubman National Historical Park over in Auburn.
In Auburn.
It's in Auburn, yeah. And so we help them out and they help us out, and we're all rangers.
All rangers. And so they're really, if you pull together Waterloo, where the McClintock houses are, and then Seneca Falls, and then Auburn, you really have a nice area to visit.
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot to do here. The New York Equal Rights Heritage Center over in Auburn, which is new. There's a lot there to digest as well.
I see. Is that in Seneca Falls?
It's in Auburn.
In Auburn.
It's in Auburn. But it's a visitor center for the whole region. And it's they highlight a lot of the causes of equal rights. So it's not just women's rights. They do touch on formerly enslaved people and indigenous people and things like that. So there's a lot there too to take in. Yeah.
I see. And now, are students involved at the Women's Rights National Historical Park?
In the fact that we host students?
As interns, or are there student opportunities?
There are. So we do typically have a couple of student interns each summer. We're going to have a teacher intern this summer, which is a National Park Service program called Teacher Ranger Teacher.
Teacher Ranger Teacher.
Correct.
I see. And so people could apply for it.
Anyone. You just have to be a teacher.
I see.
So any teacher can apply for any Teacher Ranger Teacher position all the way across the country.
I see. That's fascinating.
And they happen in the summer.
I see. And are the interns generally college-age students or high school age?
So we usually hire interns at both college and high school level.
I see.
So
And what would a typical day be like for them?
So typically the high school students, what we try to do is kind of, oftentimes they've never had a job. So we try to just kind of help offer them skills of customer service and visitor services downstairs, and how to greet people, how to share information and share stories, and then we try not to have them do grunt work, because that's just mean. So we do have them doing things like that. We had a second year high school student intern a couple of years ago, and she would greet people in the chapel, and she would share a little bit of the story there and be there to answer some questions.
I see. So a docent-like role.
Correct, yeah. So after a couple of years, she was able to do that, and she was, feeling comfortable enough to do that. So.
What other educational things would people find here at the park?
So we just finished. We are in the process. We're in the middle of a 5-part series on resolutions. It's titled Resolutions Revisited.
I see.
And so we have Professor Melinda Gruby. Dr. Gruby is coming in once a month, and what we have done is we've taken the resolutions from the Declaration of Sentiments, and we have grouped them by theme. And so every month we have a conversation about that.
And is this a pretty typical thing? Because this television show, that'll be over by the time people see the show, maybe.
So there's a chance we're going to run it again next year.
I see.
For the Centennial.
I see.
We might just run parts of it. And the idea is, if we do it again next year, we might have the professor and then an expert in the field, and have them kind of talk about the topics together. And
then there's your annual summer convention, I think.
Correct. We have convention days coming up this July 19, 20, 21.
Is it typically about that third weekend of July?
It is, and it's always the closest weekend to the actual dates of the convention, which are the 19th and 20th. So I think that's for us this year, the 19th, 20th, and 21st. So we have lots of things planned, just 3 days of lots of family activities, lots of historian lectures, lots of music, things like that. So.
And is that typical for the convention days in the summer?
It is, yeah. Yeah, we have a lot of people that come every year. We have people who, come from across the country because they, saw it on social media and they wanted to, come and participate. And so it is pretty exciting. And the whole downtown participates in the convention.
That's fascinating.
So all of our kind of like-minded institutions have something going on.
And now, do you accept donations at the park?
We do. So we have a donation box downstairs.
That's easy.
Right by the door. It's usually most national parks have a donation box. Yeah, a lot of the parks are fee free.
Fee free.
This park is also fee free. We have no fees here at all.
That's amazing.
So all of our programming, no entrance fees, no programming fees. No matter what we do here at this park, will always be free.
That's a wonderful thing. Wonderful thing. And now, if people wanted a memento of their visit.
So we have a wonderful bookstore. It has gifts and books. We really do. We have a wonderful array of books for young people, from the tiniest of age, right up through probably young readers in middle school, early high school. And then we have a really, we have a pretty large selection of books on our topic. And also on, the topics of anti-slavery, and things like that really also touch our story.
Well, that sounds like a marvelous way to spend some time here in Seneca Falls and neighboring communities of Women's Rights National Historical Park.
We like to, we really enjoy it when our own, community members come in, and we enjoy it when people come, all the way from, Hawaii and islands and South America and Europe and from everywhere. So.
Well, thanks for making us so welcome here today in the Spotlight, and thanks for joining me to tell us all about the programs and the exciting visit you can have at the Women's Rights National Historical Park in Seneca Falls. My guest has been Denise DeLucia. She's an education assistant here at the park. Thanks again, DeLucia.
Thank you so much.
In the Spotlight is a production of Penfield Television with sponsorship from Nocon & Associates, a private wealth advisory practice of Ameriprise Financial Advisors. If you enjoy this program, please find us on Facebook, like and share the program, and find our full playlist on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching.